Colorado Territory, summer of 1874. The sky stretched wide and unbroken above the San Luis Valley, heat shimmering off the earth like a breath held too long. Merritt Powell reined in his horse when he spotted the girl by the creek. She was on her knees, her dark skirt soaked where it touched the wet grass, her hands trembling against the neck of a chestnut mare gasping its last breaths. The horse's sides heaved, sweat streaking the hide, and the young woman really clutched the animal like it was the last thing tethering her to the world. Merritt did not move at first. He watched her, stunned by the rawness of it all. Her hair had come loose from its pins, long and dark, tangled with the dust of the trail. Mud streaked her face. She was crying, not the kind of crying that made a sound, but the silent kind that looked like it hurt to hold in. He stepped down from his horse slow, boots crunching against the dry grass. "Miss," he said gently. She flinched but did not look at him. "She got snake-bit an hour back. I tried to get her here to water. I was too late." Merritt removed his hat and held it against his chest. "I am real sorry." "That horse was yours. She was my only thing," the girl whispered. Merritt crouched beside her, not too close. "You mind if I help her pass easier?" The girl hesitated, then nodded. Her eyes were wide, red-rimmed. "Please?" He drew his revolver slow, speaking soft to the horse as he moved around its head. "Esich, you are all right now, girl. You did real good." The shot was quick, clean. The mare stilled. The girl let out a sound like her ribs cracked under it. Merritt stayed crouched, giving her space, his hat still in his hand. "I do not even know your name," he said after a moment. She wiped her face with her sleeve, though it only smeared the dirt. "Keziah Boone, from Cannon City, or I was." "Keziah," he said, trying the sound of it. "I am Merritt Powell." She looked at him then. Her eyes were a deep, steady brown, tear-wet but sharp. "You always ride toward crying women. Just happened to be headed into Del Norte, saw the dust rise, figured someone might need help." Keziah looked back at the horse. "She got me this far. I walked her near 2 miles, hoping. You came from Cannon City alone. My uncle's farm shut down after the last frost. He left for Kansas. I stayed behind, but there was nothing left. Figured I would head south, maybe find work." Merritt nodded, glancing at the sun. "You cannot stay out here alone. There is a ranch a few miles north. I work for the Thompsons. They would not mind letting you rest the night." "I do not want charity." "I am not offering charity. I am offering decency." Keziah studied him again, like she was measuring the weight of his words. After a breath, she nodded. "All right." He helped her up, careful not to touch her unless she asked. She limped slightly, but said nothing of it. When they reached his horse, he offered his hand. She took it, firm and steady, and he lifted her into the saddle before swinging up behind her. She tensed at first, then settled. They rode north. The Thompsons were kind, just as Merritt promised. Mrs. Thompson gave Keziah a hot meal, a clean dress, and a cot in the spare room. Merritt waited outside, watching the stars blink into view. When Keziah stepped onto the porch later, her face was washed, her hair braided back. She looked tired but steadier. "I owe you," she said. "You do not owe me anything. You stopped. Most men would not have." He met her eyes. "You looked like someone who had lost more than she could carry." "I have," she said quietly, folding her arms. "My mother died when I was 12. My father was gone before that. My uncle tried, but he had his own kids, his own worries. I was extra." Merritt leaned against the porch post. "I know what that feels like. I lost my brother out near Abiquiu. After that, I kept riding, figured stillness would only make the grief louder." Keziah looked away. "I do not know where to go from here. You do not have to figure that out tonight." She nodded, and they stood in silence until the porch lamp flickered out. The next morning, Keziah helped Mrs. Thompson with chores. She moved quieter than most, but with purpose. Merritt watched her from the corral, noting how she bridled a skittish mule with the same calm she showed the dying horse. That evening, he saddled 2 horses and met her by the fence. "Ride with me," she hesitated, then smiled, small but real. "All right." They rode out to a ridge where the valley dipped wide and green. The sun painted gold across the fields. Keziah dismounted first, walking to the edge. Merritt joined her, she said. "I thought I could do this on my own. I thought I had to. But I think I was wrong." "You are not weak for needing someone," Merritt said. She turned to him. "And you, who do you lean on?" He looked at her, long and true. Right now, her breath hitched just slightly. Then she stepped closer. You barely know me. I know you held your horse until the end. I know you walk with pain but do not mention it. I know you listen more than you speak. That is knowing enough for now. Her eyes filled again, but this time not with grief, with something softer. She reached for his hand, and this time she did not let go. The sun slipped behind the hills and they stood together, steady and quiet, until the stars took over the sky. Keziah stood in the Thompson barn near sundown, her sleeves rolled, hands raw from scrubbing tack. A row of cleaned harnesses hung behind her like dark, orderly ghosts. The scent of oiled leather drifted through the warm air. She moved with care, her eyes steady on the worn saddle she was mending, fingers stitching through the cracked edge where the flank strap had come loose. Merritt's boots sounded at the door, slow and careful, like he knew she was somewhere between tired and not ready to stop. He leaned against the frame, arms crossed, hat tucked under one elbow. I told Mrs. Thompson you'd earned a seat at her table tonight, he said. She's making beans with salt pork. Keziah tied off the thread and set the saddle aside. I'll be in shortly. Merritt didn't move. You always keep working when you don't have to. She wiped her palms on her skirt. I don't know how to be still. He stepped inside, trailing dust from the yard. You could sit, just for a minute. I've got something. She hesitated, then walked to the wooden crate he'd turned into a bench the week before. He sat beside her, reached into his vest pocket and pulled out a folded scrap of cloth. Inside it, a small, flat tin. I found it in town yesterday, he said. Saddle soap, real stuff. Thought you'd know what to do with it. Keziah ran her thumb over the tin's lid, eyes unreadable. Most people would have brought back something pretty. I figured you'd rather have something that earns its keep. She looked up, the corners of her mouth twitching, not a smile, not quite. You figured right. They sat a while, quiet but not empty. Eventually, she said, where do you sleep when you're not running errands for strangers? He stretched his legs out. There's a bunkhouse behind the stables. It's got mice, but they mind their business. You ever think about settling down? He didn't answer right away. A fly buzzed near his shoulder, then vanished. I used to think I would, he said. Then things kept shifting under me. Places changed. People left. I got used to moving. Keziah ran her fingers over the edge of the tin. That's not the same as wanting it. He turned his head, watching her. You want it. I want a place where the ground don't feel borrowed. Merritt nodded slowly. That's a good way to put it. She stood then, brushing grit from her skirt. I'll help Mrs. Thompson with supper. He rose, but didn't follow. You'll let me ride out with you tomorrow. I haven't said I'm leaving. You didn't say you're staying. She paused at the door, one hand resting against the frame. I haven't decided yet. The next morning, the sky was pale with smoke from some far-off burn. Keziah found Merritt in the west field, checking fence lines. She walked with her arms crossed, boots damp with dew. You ever mend wire before? He asked without looking up. No, he handed her the pliers anyway. Then today you learn. By midday, sweat traced her jaw and her hands were nicked from barbs. Merritt worked beside her in silence, except when he pointed out which knots held better and how to spot a loose post without tugging it. When they stopped to drink, they sat beneath a cottonwood, its leaves flashing in the wind like silver coins. She tipped her canteen back, then handed it to him. Is this what your days always look like? Most of them. You mind it? No, he said. Some days you fix fences, some days you don't, but it's honest. Keziah leaned back against the trunk. That's not what I meant. He looked at her then, eyes narrowed against the brightness. I don't mind what it is if there's someone it means something to. She didn't reply. But her gaze didn't drift either. That evening she didn't return to the barn. Instead, she found Merritt by the corral, watching the horses settle. She walked up beside him, close enough that her sleeve brushed his. I've been thinking, she said. He kept his eyes ahead. I figured I could earn my keep here, she said. I'm not asking for favors, just time until I know what's next. He turned to her. I'd rather you stay because you want to. I'm not ready to want anything yet, she said, but I trust you. That's more than I've had in a long time. His voice dropped. That's enough for me. She reached for his hand without looking at him. And this time, when her fingers curled between his, he didn't let go. July settled in dry and unyielding across the valley. Wind carried grit through the cotton rows, and the river had gone down to a trickle, its banks cracked like old skin. Keziah rose before the rooster now, her skirt hem stiff with dust before breakfast, hands calloused into the shape of work. She'd taken to patching the Thompson boys' shirts in the evenings, quiet in the lamp-lit kitchen, while Mrs. Thompson read scripture aloud and Merritt carved slivers of wood into little animals for the twins. He'd given Keziah a wolf one night, small enough to fit in her palm. She didn't thank him, just tucked it into her apron pocket and held it there a long while. They spoke less during the days, but not because anything was left unsaid. It was a comfort, the way he worked beside her without filling the air. He'd started showing her how to read the land where water might hide beneath the soil, how to follow a broken fence to the place deer slipped through. She listened closely, her eyes sharp with hunger for knowing. One cloudless afternoon, Merritt rode up with a rolled map under his arm. He found Keziah at the woodpile, sleeves damp with sweat, her braid coming loose. "I need a second pair of eyes," he said. "Thought you might want to come." She followed him to the porch, where he unrolled the map across the wide table. The parchment was worn soft, corners torn, but the lines were sure. "That's the land Mr. Thompson is thinking of buying," Merritt said, tapping near the base of the Sangre de Cristos. "He wants to graze cattle there come spring." She leaned in, tracing the ridgeline with her finger. "That's dry slope, windward." He looked up at her sharply. "You know that from books?" "No, from watching where snow melts first." His mouth pulled into something close to a smile, but quieter. "You want to come ride it with me tomorrow, see it up close," she straightened. "If I go, I want my say to count." "It will." They left at dawn, just the two of them, each with a bedroll and a canteen. The trail rose into foothills, the air thinning into pine. Keziah rode steadier now, her hands sure on the reins. They reached a bluff by mid-morning, where the wind carried the scent of juniper and dry moss. She dismounted first, walking the ridge slow. Merritt stayed back, watching how she crouched to touch the earth, sifted it through her fingers. "It's brittle," she said. "No spring grass would take root here," he nodded. "I wanted to see if you'd say it." She turned. "You already knew, wanted to hear it from you." They sat under a twisted pine, sharing bread and dried pears. She leaned back against the trunk, eyes on the distant horizon. "You ever think about owning land yourself?" she asked. "Not seriously," he said. "Didn't seem likely." "What if it was?" He looked at her, the curve of her cheek in shadow. "Are you asking for yourself?" "I don't know." Her voice was low. "I think I stopped imagining things a while back. But lately, it comes back sometimes." He reached for her hand, not sudden, just steady. She didn't pull away. "I'd want to build something that lasts," she said after a long silence. "Not just survive, I've done enough of that." "You're not alone anymore," he said. "I'm starting to believe that." She looked at him then, eyes open in a way he hadn't seen before, not guarded, not waiting to run. He leaned in, slow enough for her to turn away if she'd wanted. But she didn't. When their lips met, it wasn't rushed or hungry. It felt like soil catching seed. When they parted, she rested her forehead against his. "If I stayed," she whispered, "it wouldn't be as a guest." "You'd be home," he said. They rode back with the sun behind them, the air golden and warm. That night, Keziah sat with Mrs. Thompson and mended nothing. Merritt carved nothing. They just sat together on the porch, knees nearly touching as the first stars blinked into view. Neither of them said anything. They didn't need to. A week passed, and the valley turned sharper with heat, the kind that curled leaves and sent cattle seeking shade before midday. Keziah had taken to riding out alone in the early mornings, checking the outer pastures, always back before the sun laid its full weight across the land. Merritt didn't ask where she went. He trusted her to come back, and she always did. One morning, she returned with a folded scrap of paper tucked in her saddlebag. She found Merritt at the forge, fitting shoes for a bay gelding with a tender hoof. She waited until he'd finished tightening the last nail before she spoke. "Someone from Cannon City sent word," she said, quiet but certain. He stood, wiping his hands on a rag. "Who?" "Mr. Wilkes. He ran the dry goods store, said there's someone looking into my uncle's land. Surveyors came through. There's talk of a railroad spur being laid through that part of the foothills." Merritt's brow furrowed, but he said nothing. "I never thought it was worth anything," Keziah added. "But if that line cuts through the north edge, it might be." You thinking to go back? She looked out toward the ridge where the cottonwoods bent in the wind. I don't know. It's not the land that draws me. It's what it could buy. He nodded once. You've got a right to think like that. I'd need someone to draw the boundary lines straight, make sure nothing gets lost in the telling. I can ride with you, he said. Without hesitation, she blinked. It'd be a hard ride. 2 days, maybe more. I've done worse. Keziah studied him for a moment. I don't want to be beholden to anyone over it. You won't be, but I want to see you stand where you came from with your back straight. They left the next morning, riding light but steady. The trail turned rockier as they climbed northward, the scrub thinned, and the air cooled with altitude. On the second evening, they camped in a narrow canyon where the fire flickered against the red stone walls, and coyotes sang from a distance. Keziah sat with her knees drawn close, a wool blanket around her shoulders. My mother was buried under a cottonwood near the back of the property, she said. I haven't been back since. Merritt stirred the coals. You want to stop there first, she nodded. I think I need to. They reached the old Boone homestead by midday. The house had fallen in on itself, roof sagged, porch steps rotted, but the cottonwood still stood, taller than she remembered. The grave beneath it was marked with a flat stone, worn smooth by wind. She stood in front of it a long while, not speaking. Merritt waited by the fence, hands in his pockets. When she turned back to him, her eyes were dry. She died in the spring, she said. I planted wild sweet pea around the stone, but it never took. Some things don't root easy, he said. She looked over the field beyond, the edge where the land sloped toward the old cattle path. If the railroad comes through, they'll want that rise. It's the only solid ground for miles. He pulled a folded square from his saddlebag. I brought paper and chalk. We can draw it out. They worked through the heat of the afternoon, marking the corners, measuring with steps and string. She moved with purpose, directing where the old barn once stood, where the well still held water deep in the earth. By dusk, they sat on the edge of the field, the map spread between them. I never thought I'd want to claim anything again, she said. You're not just claiming land, he said. You're shaping what comes next. She looked at him, her face shadowed by the tilt of her hat. And you. What do you want from all this? He didn't look away. I want to build with someone who knows how to hold fast through storm and drought, someone who doesn't flinch at hard ground. Her voice was steady. You mean me? I do. She folded the map with care, slid it into the saddlebag. Then let's go home, she said. They rode south the next morning, the wind at their backs. Keziah didn't look back once. She didn't need to. Everything worth keeping was ahead of her now. They returned to the Thompson ranch with dust in their boots and new weight in their shoulders, though not the kind that dragged. The land Keziah had once fled now lay behind her, its usefulness folded into a deed and its ghosts left undisturbed. She kept the boundary map rolled tight, tucked beneath her cot, not because she doubted it, but because it felt like a seed not yet planted. Late August brought storms that cracked open the sky in the afternoons and left the ground steaming by dusk. Keziah helped dig a new irrigation trench below the lower field, her arms stronger now, her back straight as a fence post. She carried herself like someone who had chosen their place, not clung to it, but claimed it. One evening, as the air cooled and the crickets started up, Merritt found her restringing the clothesline behind the bunkhouse. She tied each knot with neat precision, sleeves rolled, fingers quick. He stood with one hand resting on the fence rail. I've been offered a share in the winter cattle drive. North to Wyoming, pays decent. She didn't look up. Thompson'll be short a man if you go. They'll manage. He said he'd keep a place for me either way. She finished the last knot, brushing her hands together. You want to go? I've done it before. It's hard country. Cold, long days, but I'd earn enough to put toward, he paused, then set his jaw, toward a piece of land if I had a reason to. She turned then, slow and deliberate. You think I'd wait here for you? No, he said. I think you'd go with me if you wanted the same things I do. Keziah stepped down from the stool, wiping her palms on her skirt. I've spent most of my life being pulled along by other people's choices. I don't plan on doing that again. I wouldn't ask you to. She looked at him hard. Then say what it is you do want. He didn't hesitate. I want a place that's ours. Not borrowed, not promised built. I want to see you come in from the field at dusk and know you'll be there again at dawn. I want to wake up beside you on a winter morning and not wonder how long it'll last. The wind lifted her braids slightly. She didn't speak for a long moment, just took a slow step closer. I never asked for a man to fix anything for me, she said. I know that, but I'd take a man who'd build something with me, side by side. His voice was low. I'm standing here. She reached out and touched the edge of his collar, her fingers brushing the cotton. Then don't go to Wyoming. I won't if you'll stay. She smiled, soft but certain. I ain't going anywhere. They married in early September. No church, no preacher, just Mrs. Thompson standing with a Bible and hands folded firm, and Mr. Thompson nodding solemn without much fuss. The vows were spoken plain, under the open sky with a wind that carried no dust. The twins tossed dried corn from their pockets like confetti, giggling when it landed in Keziah's hair. Merritt built them a house off the north pasture, near the creek where the water ran steady even in dry years. He laid every board himself, Keziah measuring behind him, hammering the nails that held it all together. She planted beans along the south wall and sunflowers that grew taller than the windows by the end of the first summer. Their days settled into rhythm. Keziah taught the Thompson boys to read with a stern eye and a steady hand, while Merritt broke colts for the neighbors come spring. They shared the porch swing in the evenings, her head resting on his shoulder, his arm around her waist. One night, years on, Merritt came in from the barn with his coat wet from a late storm. Keziah set a pot of stew on the table, still in her apron, her cheeks flushed from the fire. He watched her for a moment, then said, "You remember that first night?" "When I found you by the creek," she nodded without turning. "I remember. I didn't know then what I'd found." She looked over her shoulder, smiling without words. And then she crossed to him, wrapping her arms slow around his middle, resting her face against his chest. "You didn't find me," she said. "We found each other." Outside, the wind moved gentle through the grass. Inside, the light glowed warm on their joined hands, the sound of the fire steady and sure, and nothing in them ached for anything else again.